Okay, so someone was asking something when I just clicked close to the bar. Was there any question from student side? Okay, so you're back. We are back to the slide. I hope all of you can see. So I am talking about, is research only laboratory based? No. For science students, engineering students maybe, and the students who have more work to do with the science, it is, yes, it is laboratory based. And for the students who are not related to science fields, it is not laboratory based. Okay. And then it is tightly controlled. Yes, if you talk about quantitative, it is tightly controlled because quantitative research designs talk about facts and figures only, whereas in qualitative research design, okay. Um, yes, by the way, you can go for the demands if you want, Sumaya, and you can come back again, okay? And I'll share the recording with you if that's okay, right? Okay, so I was telling you, it is tightly controlled. Yes, it is tightly controlled if you talk about quantitative side of research. And in qualitative type of research, it is not, right? And in qualitative research, we can have, since we're talking about people and perception, so we can have difference in that as well. It lacks external validity. Well, I will explain this maybe in the last because it is more related to that. When you're talking about applied, when you apply the theory in practice, you go for answers. You go for results. Okay, it is less invasive. It is field-based. It is loosely controlled, externally valid. It focuses on a fact, less reductive. Okay. And this is more an example which I would skip because I have another thing very important to explain. So we're talking about research design itself, which is a third topic. Research design, which is the background of your research, right? If you are a person who is going to work on something which will have a very high number of people involved, talk about hundreds of people, for example, you're going to collect the data from hundred of people. Now, your research type is working on 100 people. How would you select research design for that? Now, the number, the sample that you already decided, or the nature of the research is going to address the research design. For example, you're going for 100 people, you must be going for quantitative, not qualitative at all, right? So we're going to learn the three different research designs: experimental research, descriptive research, and analytical research. Let's see what do they have and what is the difference of these research designs to talking about from one person to another person. It is different, of course, depending on your studies. Now, I like to move from analytical research, then descriptive, and then experimental. Analytical research is, for example, I'm a person who is not I'm not person who is doing research for a degree program. Okay, I am not doing research for MS, for example, or BS. I'm a person who is doing research just for the sake of observation, right? Just for the sake of observation. Just a minute, I want Uruj to have joined. Uruj, my voice is clear to you? Because it's important for you to understand. But that is clear. Uruj, can you hear me? If yes, please respond.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, so I was talking about analytical research, and I'm a person who is not going to go for a degree program. Just I'm doing research for the sake of understanding about any particular thing. Or whatever you do, आप क्या करते हैं? For example, आपको um, कोई एक टर्म समझ में नहीं आ रही, depending on the field that you're in. आपको कोई एक टर्म समझ में नहीं आ रही, you go on the Google Chrome and you write about that term, and you get to see a lot of definitions, a lot of scholars writing about that or explaining that term to you. That is exactly the definition of reviews. Okay, you're going to learn how people have talked about certain things. Okay, and that can be, the resource can be Google, can be book, can be anything else, right? But it should have some evidences, my dear. It should not be like someone has said उसने ये बोला था इसलिए. No, 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 no. There's no point of learning things कि उसने बोला था, right? There has to be facts and figures for understanding. Now, ये जो हम Google पे कोई भी चीज़ समझ में नहीं आती, you just Google it. So that is actually review. Okay. That does not include the whole research process. The second thing is these reviews may have meta-analysis. If you want, you can go for a research paper that will be review based, and that might have some elements of research. ठीक है, लेकिन जो रिव्यू इटसेल्फ होता है वो मैंने जो आपको एग्जांपल बताया कि जो छोटी छोटी चीज़ें हम गूगल पे सर्च करते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल द रेमेडी टू acidity. For example, I'm having acidity. How would I, what are the tips and tricks I can, reduce it, and what should I have in my, diet, and this and that. That is basically your review. Okay, that is again a type of research, but in this type of research, you're not going through the whole process of research itself, right? But if you want to talk about, if you want to formulate a research paper, you might go for certain, like, peculiarities of research, and that will be called as meta-analysis. It will not be reviews anymore, right? Then we have philosophical. Now, philosophical analytical research includes the close observation of all the different research types and different research literature reviews according to your particular chosen topic, and that is different in a way that you will only focus on the the research scholars, which are or who are related to your work. गूगल पे हमें कोई किसी चीज़ का सॉल्यूशन नहीं मिल रहा, you just you just write it on Google and you get a lot of people addressing the same thing to you. अब वो यूट्यूबर भी हो सकता है, अब वो कोई आर्टिस्ट भी हो सकता है, कोई भी हो सकता है. But when you talk about philosophical, you need to, if you have a scientific question, you need to go to a scientist to answer that for you. If you have a linguistics related question, you need to go to a linguist. You will refer a linguist. That is philosophical. So the difference between reviews and philosophical is that in reviews and philosophical, the only type, in these two types, the only difference is that in reviews you can go and search about anybody, and in philosophical you need to be very much peculiar. You need to be very much careful, right? The person should be related to your field of study. The third thing, which is a type of analytical research, includes historical. Now, in this type of study, you will only just mention how some process has evolved since history. For example, how the theory of evolution, for example, how we humans have evolved from certain age or certain time till 2021, and that is evolution. That is talking about history. This again, of course, needs a lot of research, and it needs a lot of like accuracy as well. Obviously you cannot rely on anything and everything, so there has to be an accuracy for the thing. So historical completely talks about evolution sort of things from one point till another point in time or in history. Let's talk about descriptive research. This is our type of research. By our type of research I mean linguistic students, literature students, and talk about art students, means any language student, right? and we all do descriptive research, by the way. And the experimental research, we also do experimental researches as well, but experiments are being done by science students. You talk about science, your business, economics, and all these computer science students and mathematics students and all of them. So they are going to do experimental research. This is how the different fields have different, like, types of research. So this is how you're going to select whatever field you are in and whatever the type of study you are conducting, right? Let's talk about descriptive study. Now, in descriptive study, we have two major things. The one is case study and the other is survey. Now, if you talk about a case study, that is basically a very particular to a particular group of people or a particular area. For example, I am very much interested to know about the attitudes of teachers in public schools, for example. Now, I am very much addressing the teachers which are in public schools only. I'm not concerning with private schools or the number of other schools as well. Now, it is up to me how am I going to conduct that research and how am I going to, select the participants. And the number of participants may also be less, and that is acceptable, right? So that is case study because you're talking about one particular group. Now that group can be public, private, it can be, based on territory. For example, Hyderabad people, for example, Jamshara people, for example, Miwakas people. It can be based on this. For example, people, I mean, the Muslims, the Hindus, the other religion. It can have any division, but it should have some division. And that is how we do case study. Talking about surveys are quite simple in a sense that it does not have any limitation, right? It may be covered with a few number of people and many number of people, as many as you want. It does not have any particular limitation. So in survey we have three different types more, right? Cross-sectional, longitudinal, and correlational. So these three different types of survey differ from each other in their approach in such a way that a cross-sectional has to compare and contrast between two things. For example, what are the attitudes of teachers in public sector universities and private sector universities? So if you're going to see the comparison of these two things, you need to go for cross-sectional type of survey. There is now no more need of case study. Okay, and and by the way, in case study, we don't do compare and contrast because that is the quality of. Um, okay, so that is the. Just give me 1 minute. I need to talk to a student. Okay. This student was a bit late, so that's why I just paused for a while so that she can be a part of the lecture as well. I'm so sorry for this inconvenience, but students just forgot that it was workshop today, so they're joining now, and I want all the students to be here. That's why. Okay, Aksa, are you there? All right, Aksa, can you hear me? If yes, please say yes.
Assalamualaikum, ma'am. Yes, I'm there.
Well, thank you. All right, so Aksa, you can see on the screen that I'm explaining different research designs, right? And it's okay if you have, I mean, of course, you have missed the first class, and I'll send the recording to you. It's just fine, no big deal. So I have explained analytical research, which you can see on in the recording, and we are basically talking about descriptive research right now, and I am explaining survey. Okay, so I have already explained in the cross-sectional type of survey, we are going to compare and contrast two different um, research, two different research groups. For example, the attitudes of teachers in public sector universities and the attitudes of teachers in private sector universities, right? So we are going to talk about these two public sector and private sector groups, and we are going to compare and contrast between them. So if you want to go for a compare and contrast, it is a cross-sectional type of study, and that is a part of survey, and that happens in qualitative, right? Now we have longitudinal study, which is a second type of survey. In this survey, we just have one basic notion, and we don't have anything fixed with that. We can go for public, private, we can go for teachers, students, whatsoever. Okay, we don't have like fixed, more fixed rules and regulations. We have only one thing to focus upon, which is maybe like universities, right? University, we're going to conduct a research on English language practice in university, for example, right? Now that is more related to linguistics, but since I'm a resource person is from linguistics, so never mind. For example, we are going to talk about the language difficulties of students. Okay, अब ये एक general topic हो गया, which can be anywhere. Talk about public sector, private sector, talk about first year student, second year student, third year student, or final year student. It does not have many fixed rules, so that will be longitudinal study. And in longitudinal study you have got quite a free hand in picking and choosing upon the audience or participant, right? But again, of course, this sort of research is very not practiced completely in academia. If you talk about degree programs, क्योंकि जो degree programs होते हैं उनमें you need to have some validity. There's an issue of reliability and validity of the data, so that's why there are few limited studies that we select as a student, and if you're associated with some degree programs, right? So that we need to keep in mind. Then we have correlational. Again, in correlational we have like different parameters. We have, I will be explaining to you these variables that we have, and in these variables we basically work upon them. Those variables may slightly differ from the throughout the research process. Maybe starting may they have a different impact, and in the end they have a different impact. So in if you talk about correlational survey, it is more related to like that parameters or variables. ठीक? So I have explained cross-sectional, longitudinal, and correlational survey with you. And cross-sectional defines, compare and contrast. Longitudinal is one straight direction. It might have limitations, it might not have limitations. It's a bit flexible. When you talk about correlational, it has variables, and that needs to be very much addressed correctly. Now, let's move to the third one, which is experimental research. And in experimental research, we talk about pre-designs, quasi-experimental design means pre-experimental design, quasi-experimental design, true experimental designs, and statistical designs. Now, this is purely, this quantitative types of it. Yes, Aksa, if you have any question, you're very much welcome.
Ma'am, can you describe the cross-sectional survey again?
Okay. In cross-sectional survey, we are going to compare and contrast between two groups. It can be in terms of, I mean, you talk about any one particular common point in two groups. For example, the learning difficulties in BS Part 1 and BS Part 2. Now, the students in BS Part 1 are different from the other level of language. I mean, talk about language difficulty. So there must be difference. So we have two groups. When we are having two groups and we are having comparing and contrasting situation between them, that type of study is cross-sectional study. Okay, so we use that type of survey when we are going to conduct some you know compare and contrast sort of study. So the research design is always selected based on what you're going to do in the research that you have already had in your mind, the research theme. अगर आपकी research theme में ही comparison है, तो you'll go for cross sectional. There's no need for going. There's no need to going for any other. So we're talking about experimental research. In experimental, we have these
But
three.
ma'am, it is necessary to do a survey for research?
No, I've explained a bit earlier that it depends on basically the nature of research. In quantitative, sometimes but basically in quantitative, we go for, a big number of participants. If your participants have they range from more than 500, let's say. If you have 500 participants, you need to go for a pilot study. I remember I taught you that one. That pilot study is a sample, research data collection. तो वो sample होती है. वो sample क्यों होती है? Because you have to apply. If that is successful, then you will apply it to larger number of people. If it is not successful, then you cannot, of course, generalize that. For example, COVID-19 vaccine, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, तो वो जो है, जो वैक्सीन है जो आज पूरी दुनिया में लग रही है, तो वो सबसे पहले किसी ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल पे अप्लाई की गई होगी, वहाँ पे टेस्ट किया गया होगा, इफ दैट हैपेंस करेक्टली और नो. इफ दैट डजंट हैपन करेक्टली, then it is a flopped one. तो इस वजह से अगर वो फ्लॉप्ड है, मतलब आपको टेस्ट करना है, अपने आप को टेस्ट कर रहे हैं, आप अपनी एक्सपेरिमेंट्स को टेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि इफ दैट हैपेंस, जैसे साइंस में जो साइंटिस्ट होते हैं वो इसी तरह करते हैं स्टडी, या जो जो डिफरेंट साइंटिफिक फील्ड्स में होते हैं स्टूडेंट्स, तो वो इसी तरह करते हैं, वो एक पायलट स्टडी करते हैं कि if the application that I'm applying on something, if they are working correctly, then I will generalize the results, and then I will go for the larger number of data collection itself. If it is not successful here, it cannot be successful on 500 people, of course, right? So that is how basically we need to go for pilot study. But that happens only when you're conducting research on big number of people. Otherwise 50 100 students doesn't matter. You don't need to literally go for a pilot study with them. Otherwise it depends, I mean, whatever your supervisor says to you. So that is how it differs from one another. So we have so far covered different types of research designs, and I will be explaining a little bit elaboratively in the next slides as well, but this is how a general description of different types. So, oh yes, I just said experimental research. These all three types, they are completely based on, facts and figures, and they are quantitative. Sorry, they're quantitative types of research. So let's go through one of them. Which one of them? So you need to go for reviews, a critical account of present understanding what is happening now. A meta-analysis is a quantitative method of review when you need to go for um, yes, when you need to go for reviews, you need to see what type of your study is. If it is the simplest one, you need to, just the way we Google things on daily basis, that's just complete review. That's the simplest review. But if you're going for something which is more detailed, or you're looking for a solution to a problem, you need to be very much specific to that particular review. Then we have historical research. I told you again, you need to have primary and secondary resources. That means you need to have this is more related to the study in law. There you need to have different nature of research से मुराद ये कि जो वो केस लेते हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल पीपल इन लॉ मे बी, तो वो जो है ना हर चीज को क्लोजली स्टडी करते हैं, इवन इन वेरी वेरी माइन्यूट डिटेल्स, राइट? दे नीड टू स्टडी एवरीथिंग इन कंप्लीट डिटेल. If they don't, then they might lead into some big trouble at any point. The third one is organizing philosophical, I mean, organizing existing evidence into a comprehensive theoretical model. I just told you. Philosophical is more about perceptions and your own understanding, and that refers to your, directed. Authors or writers or researchers or scholars who are related to your work. You cannot just Google anyone, I mean, out of blue. You need to be very much peculiar. All right. All right. So we're talking about case study. These are one line definition of all that we have done in the previous slide. A case study is accurate or detailed information from an individual, right? For example, you're talking about Muslims. You need to go to every other individual Muslim and go need to know about the perceptions of them, right? This is how we work. If you're talking about, for example, people in Syria, okay? Now you need to go there and investigate every other person from Syria and what do their difficulties do have they are facing, and they are, I mean, what do they think about things. This is how case studies work. And the most difficult type of researchers these days is case study, because you can not always afford to go to the places that you're studying. And I mean, talking about ethical reasons and security issues and these sort of things. Okay, so the case studies are these days. Earlier on, case studies were not that much difficult. But if you talk about present types of studies, case studies are quite difficult if they are applicable on international levels. Then you might have some difference in them. Then you talk about survey, the cross-sectional status of various groups at a one given point in time. I just already told you. Longitudinal status of a given group at various points in time, correlational relationship between variables. We have explained that clearly. And we have Aksa who has joined, and Alicia also has joined. So Alicia and Aksa, it's okay if you did not join me in the starting. I must share recording with you, and you can then have a good understanding of these topics. Okay. All right. I might not go into detail with this one because it is completely depending on the quantitative type. Okay, so let's talk about experimental. I said it's completely based on experimental research involves a direct assessment of how one variable influences another variable. This allows establishment of causality, and all extraneous variables must be held constant with a single variable and is manipulated and measured and affected as well. So when you talk about experimental research, it's completely experiment based. Now that experiment can be a flop, can be a success as well. So the science students go for experimental research, and business and commerce students as well. Business and commerce students go for experimental research because they go for quantitative research, right? They need to deal with people. And when we talk about science students, they need to go for different perceptions about perceptions to nahi, different views about the scientific topics. Now we have a definition of dependent and independent variable. Since sorry, I was talking about variables, remember? Now, we are very much focused upon one group and another group. Let's say variables are two different groups. Okay. Now, one group has effect on another group, right? One group has an impact on the other group, and one is called dependent and the other is called independent, right? In one research study, we have two types of variables, and they are dependent and independent. Now the dependent variables are of course dependent on the independent ones, right? they are dependent in a way that if you change the independent variables, will have effect on the other ones, right? The independent variable is the cause. It can be manipulated or allowed to vary, and if it is varied, it will have impact on the thesis in the on the research. अगर आपका जो independent variable है उसको आप थोड़ा सा ही मूव करते हैं, या उसकी जो आपकी जो भी उसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है वो आप चेंज करते हैं, या उसके जो आपके कॉजेज हैं वो आप चेंज करते हैं, रीजंस चेंज करते हैं, तो द स्टडी चेंजेस. ठीक है? दैट इज हाउ दे आर अलाउड टू. They are predictive variables as well. The dependent variable is the effect. See, cause and effect आपको पता है, अगर ऐसा हो तो वैसा होगा. So this is more like this. English में we say the to I mean the cause and effect, and there's this Newton's law: to every action there's a reaction. So you see, action is independent and dependent one is reaction. जितना भी आप एक्शन जिस तरह का आपका एक्शन होगा उसी तरह का आपको reaction milega. So that is how, what type of independent variable you have, you will have the dependent variables functioning accordingly, right? You can change independent variable but not dependent, in simple words. And these happen only in quantitative research, not qualitative research. And by the way, science students do have independent and dependent variables, right? It should only vary in response to this, also known as the criterion leave it. The law of single variable, there'll always be uncontrollable influences. When you have one variable, you can be in a problem, because you need to always in quantitative studies, because you're working on a lot of number of people, that's why you need to have some backgrounds, and those backgrounds are kept with different numbers of variables, and you need to have them with you. Then we have pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and true experimental, which I would not like to go in detail at this moment. Okay, let's talk about sampling, but I just have only a few minutes left in the class. I might go for sampling in the next class, which is tomorrow. If you have any questions or suggestions, you people are most welcomed regarding what I have taught today.
Ma'am, it is the confirmed time of this class.
Yes, Vita, I'm going to be very much particular about the timings of the class, and we start class with on Saturdays and Sundays, and inshallah on 5 p.m. daily. I mean, daily means on weekends, right? This weekend and the next one as well. I mean, from tomorrow, then Saturday, next Saturday, then the next Sunday. So we will have a class on 5 p.m. Yes.
Okay, ma'am, please provide the recordings.
I will share the recordings with you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any other question? Anybody else has had? If you have any question, you're very much welcomed. If you have any suggestion, you're again welcome. All right, with this, I come to the end of today's class, and the time is almost up. Okay, let's check. Okay, no problem. I'm very much, I'm humbled, Bhaktavar. Thank you. All right, so tomorrow we're going to talk about sampling and, data analysis techniques. And then I will be having a little bit time for the independent field studies as well. जो मेरे पास participants हैं, उनकी independent fields भी I will discuss tomorrow, inshallah. For example, I've got students from literature, I've got students from science background. I will be dealing all of them, and I'll be telling you it in difference between these two different fields, and जो भी आज हमने बात की है how that is different in these separate fields of studies as well, inshallah. Okay, so see you tomorrow, the same time, and the link and Zoom meeting ID is same for all the classes, upcoming classes. Okay, see you next time, inshallah. Take care. Allah Hafiz.